This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, the data solution for the government's bid protest conundrum.
As you get better and better at it, you're going to end up with fewer protests in that space because you'll have locked in so many known items, and it really will come down to the two factors of who gets it there at the time required, and then what does the price look like?
Former GSAer Irv Kohler on FedGov Today in just a moment. Uniting program strategy, advanced technology, process, and execution for a more efficient government. That's Maximus. Every program, every service, every time. That's innovation forward. Learn more at maximus.com/federal. A timeout like football may be the solution for the government's protest problem. The Government Accountability Office finds more than half the companies that file protests get some kind of remedy. Irv Kohler's principal at Curve Services. He's former Assistant Commissioner for General Supplies and Services at the Federal Acquisition Service at the General Services Administration. Irv, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Your former colleague Chris Ham was on the program last week talking about bid protests, and he said this.
If the games were always stopped because you wanted to pause to make sure you were right, the games would be unwatchable. That's the scenario that we have in protests.
You wrote on LinkedIn that analogy makes a lot of sense to you. Why did that speak to you, and how do you think it fits what's going on in the protest realm today? Welcome, Irv.
Hey, thanks for having me, Francis. Yeah, I think the NFL timeout analogy works because it requires the contractors to put a little skin in the game. If you're going to frivolously protest over and over, that should be stopped at some point. And I think there's some funny cases out there where GSA did stop one truly bad actor. But I like that analogy just because it has them put the skin in the game. If they're successful, then they should continue to protest. If they're less successful, then it should be stopped. So I think that was a nice way of framing it, and it's easy to administer. What's
the best way to incent contractors either to not protest or to protest less often? I guess change kind of the landscape of the protest situation in your view, Irv.
Yeah, I really do think the timeout thing is a good answer because there are times protests are fully legitimate. We sort of get a little bit angered or upset because some of them do seem frivolous, and it's especially if it's the incumbent protesting a loss, because it's sort of an automatic follow-on and there's a real financial incentive. So that, again, it's having that balance where, hey, sometimes there's going to be legitimate ones out there, you should have at it, other times not. I also responded to Chris's article just saying, hey, we need to figure out how to do the pricing as well. Because the two things that are difficult on the government side are obviously preparing for the protest corrective action and then doing the price reasonable determination. And those are things, these happen. And so I proposed a lower of the current price, the protesters' proposed price, or the winner's proposed price, because that ensures the government gets the right deal during the protest period, takes the work off the contracting officers. Those almost would right themselves at that point, and you could move through the process a little more quickly. And then hopefully, if you had a couple losses, not allowing the people to protest for another year or something like that, just so you could strike the right balance and make it administratively easy.
Overall, maybe I'm asking the wrong question, too, because I think I'm asking these questions from the perspective of protests are a bad thing and people shouldn't do them, or it's bad for the system if people do them. And yet, you and I talked a little bit before we went on the air about the fact that the new numbers from GAO last week indicate that they write in their work 55% or so of organizations that protested to them got some kind of relief. So more than half of protests have some grounds of justification, it sounds like. Is that a fair read on my part?
Sure. I think it's absolutely a fair read. It also comes down to what those corrective actions are. Having sat through many, many protests, sometimes they're relatively minor. Sometimes you have really, really crafty lawyers that are just good at their jobs. And so you do take some corrective action and move on. Does that mean it was worthwhile? Nebulous, I would say, at best. But again, protesters do win because there were flaws in the source selection. No system is perfect, so it's a reasonable check and balance. And the fact that protests have been going down, I think, is helpful to the system because it indicates that both sides are doing somehow a better job of communicating so that we don't end up in a protest situation.
Another thing you and I talked about recently is the data that GSA collects and now supplies to both internal and external stakeholders. And the data has been the crux of a conversation for a long time. The quality of the data, the way they collect it, and so on. And that conversation, especially between the Federal Acquisition Service and the Inspector General's Office, GSA. What's your view on how that dialogue began, why it's been so contentious, and what you think it looks like today, especially as we start to think about the way the GSA is consolidating so much procurement and intends, it sounds like, to become a very, very, very heavily data-driven organization regarding acquisition, Irv?
Yeah, the original commercial sales practice is essentially a discount from your commercial price list. And the day it was created, probably in the 90s, early 90s, was about the best we could do given the limitations we had on systems, IT, some of the tools we have today. It also enabled the IG to find some pretty significant violations of that practice, and they had recovery. So, again, that process sort of worked. And then when TDR came along, the transactional data reporting, the idea was, no, we should know what we buy, who we're buying from, how much we're paying by the item, and we need to get that built into the system. The catalogs today, I call it hippie contracting in a way, because you can send me whatever you want, whatever format you want, whatever discount you want, whatever price basis you want. But having that TDR information helps understand, okay, this thing is this thing, and we should only be paying this much for it. So in the early days, the data quality wasn't always perfectly there because, hey, we had to go through a process at GSA at the time to get the system squared away, bring some more rigor to how it was reported in, how it was reported out, how it matched up. And over time and with diligent efforts in response to many IG reports, GSA embarked on that and completed it in the product space, which is where I came from. And today, it's different. The IG's findings were valid at the time. I don't believe they're as valid for the product space today because the data quality is proven to be high and useful, and it is being used in pricing today. And going forward as part of the OneGov strategy, without that knowledge of what is being purchased across government, I don't know how you come up with much of a strategy. So I really like it as sort of a centerpiece going forward, again, especially in the product space, but services will follow right along. It'll take a little bit more time, but it'll get there.
I want to come back to that idea of services and what that looks like under a OneGov strategy, but you said something there that I think is probably the crux of what people have been trying to get at throughout administrations of both parties for at least the almost 20 years that I've been in this space. And that is this thing, and this is how much we should be paying for it. And that's what nobody has known for an extended period of time. And it's striking to me that after taking so many cuts at this for so long, that, and I understand technology's driving it, and I understand the data collection capability and the cloud infrastructure that underpins it, the other technology infrastructures that underpin it. I know all of that is an evolutionary process and that somebody just didn't wave a magic wand, but to think that we're on the crux of that strikes me as pretty revolutionary, or that's a big move forward for agencies being able to spend only what they need to spend. And in a time of constrained resources, that sounds like something that is pretty revolutionary and should be celebrated. Am I overstating it at all?
Not at all. And you're absolutely correct. This really should be touted more and more because now that we're collecting the information, we've published it with industry and some of the other associations out there, getting feedback to make sure it's accurate and correct, and we have somewhat of alignment. What I love about it going forward is if you have a given product that maybe is the top seller in a market, suddenly people can see that, and either the distributors can compete on margin, or you could have a new market entrant that says, hey, if that's the top selling item, I can build a better mousetrap here in the US with a better price and let competition take over. So to me, you just could not understate how important this is going forward, because it's just an absolute requirement. And the systems and infrastructure are now built to do it. So it should just grow and get more powerful from here.
What do you think will be the best way to get that information to industry so that they can make the kinds of decisions that you just described?
So today, if you search GSA demand data in whatever search engine, it'll take you to the vendor support center site, and you'll get an Excel spreadsheet that's up to about 300,000-ish items. And it gives, sort of top 25 percentile quantity information, average price information. So that's in the hands of many of the companies today. And in my prior role, I was often telling people, go there. If you're not offering these things at these prices, you're not going to be successful in this market. And so it was helpful to both sides to understand that information better so that we're not clogging up the system with stuff that we don't need or don't buy.
All right. You mentioned services a few minutes ago, and for a long time, people have said, well, services, there's more finesse around services because it's easier to claim we're adding value in this particular way because we're using this person or this team of people, or we're doing this other thing that nobody else does. At some point, do you expect that argument to be overcome by events? And if so, what are those events that would fit services into a TDR type framework where people can really make apples to apples comparisons?
I think it'll happen in some of the fixed services like software licenses or something you're going to buy by the few or the unit, so commoditized stuff. When you get down to labor hours, that debate will wage on. But in the end, a product will have just as many attribute descriptions as a human. And if you get into industry, years of experience, certification, education, those styles of things, or the CONUS, OCONUS, which are all pretty readily available, you have to have that underpinning of that solid known thing or description set so that you can use it going forward. And the battle on that will wage on, but really it's going to come down, I think, once that is completed, and it will get done eventually, then you're going to shift over to past performance will be a bigger driver, because although Francis and Irv may have the same capabilities or the same credentials, even at somewhat similar price, Francis consistently delivers better than Irv, so that'll be the bigger deciding factor going forward.
I'm not sure that would ever be the actual outcome, that I deliver better than you on any type of anything, but thank you for using the model in that way, Irv. Is there a connection between better TDR data and the protest issue that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, Irv?
I think maybe just a little bit, because when you have the known items, it really does come down to a price and delivery shootout at that point. So I think as you get better and better at it, you're going to end up with fewer protests in that space, because you'll have locked in so many known items, and it really will come down to the two factors of who gets it there at the time required, and then what does the price look like. So yeah, it'll contribute, but I think in a smaller way.
It's excellent to talk to you. I really appreciate your time, Irv. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
You can read more about the TDR situation and the protest landscape on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Katie Arrington, performing the duties of the Chief Information Officer of the Defense Department, will be my guest this Sunday morning on FedGov Today TV. She'll tell you about progress with software Fast Track, CMMC, and more. You can watch the debut on ABC7 in Washington and on the FedGov Today YouTube channel at 10:30 Sunday morning. If you missed the debut, you can watch anytime at fedgovtoday.com and on YouTube. The next FedGov Today podcast is coming Thursday. To make sure you don't miss it, follow the FedGov Today podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. And you can listen on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. I'll talk to you Thursday. Thanks for listening.